Hello and welcome to Tartan Touchdown, Scotland's conversation with the world of American football. I'm Gavin and tonight I'm hosting our episode on week 3 of the NFL season, and I'm joined by Dan from the team. How are you tonight, Dan?
I'm good, Gavin. I'm looking forward to us spreading out all the action across this whole podcast tonight, and not just the last minute of the podcast, like a lot of the games last night.
Yeah, well, I think it felt like October had come early because we had a witching hour to remember. Scott Hansen was going crazy. So lots of great things to talk about. And we're going to go through the best bits from the week 3 action, starting off by having a look at how last season's Super Bowl contenders getting on. And we really did a superb game in Philadelphia as the Eagles eventually overcame the Rams in what was really a fantastic contest. Dan, what were your key thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, it was a really interesting game to watch. I mean, I watched a good bit of this, a lot of Red Zone last night. This game featured a lot on Red Zone last night, and the Rams looked good. I mean, I think a few weeks ago I said to the Rams, like, you know what Rams you're going to get this year? Sometimes they can look phenomenal, some weeks they can kind of look, we're not sure with the Rams, but the positive, good Rams turned up last night, and they really gave the Eagles an absolute shock last night. And at one point, I think the Rams were 26-7 up at one point in this game, which an Eagles fan, you must have been thinking, what can we do here? But the Eagles done what they always seem to just do and seem to do last year, and just done enough. But that's not the story of the game. They're just doing enough. They're obviously the story of the game we'll come to in a minute. But yeah, I mean, I think it was a good game to watch. Good game for the neutral, but a lot of action again near the end of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is one that Brian and I had picked out as one of the games to look out for. And I mean, I think like most of us in the Tartan Touchdown team expected the Eagles to come through, particularly with home field advantage. But this is one that, these teams faced off in the playoffs back in January. And the Eagles, despite being a machine for so much of the postseason, they only won by 6 in that game as well. So I think everyone expected this to be competitive, but I think when we saw early in the third quarter the Rams are up to 26-7 lead, that was really, really eye-opening.
Yeah. I mean, it was. I mean, the Eagles had to basically wake up at that point or before the game ran away from them. I think if the Rams had put another score on the board, the game would have been theirs. Do you know what I mean? But the Eagles rallied. They came back. To start to see some of the Eagles players, if you look at the receptions from the players, like AJ Brown over 100 yards. Players had to step up for the Eagles at that point, and they did. Saquon Barkley, a bit of a quiet game for himself in terms of 18 carries for 46 yards, a bit quiet for him, but definitely through the air, the Eagles got their game going, because at that point, you've got to go through the air when you're that far back. I know it's only the start of the third quarter, but you need to start going through the air and getting points on the board very quickly, and they did it, and they kind of basically took it down, but the Rams did have a chance to win this game. That's what it came down to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, I mean, you mentioned Saquon having a quiet game there, and that really created a scenario where Jalen Hurts had to go out and win this game. Seems to be a guy who's been in the league for a number of years now. Even with Super Bowl to his name now, always needs to keep coming back and proving his doubters wrong. I think he hadn't thrown a touchdown in the first 5 halves of football this season, and comes out in the second half of this one and really fuels that comeback, capped off by what proved to be the go-ahead touchdown to Devonta Smith.
Yeah, it did. Well, that's what we thought was the go-ahead touchdown to win the game at that point. I mean, Devonta Smith. I mean, three touchdowns through the air. AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert getting the touchdowns. I mean, the story of this game came at like the Eagles took the lead. So 1 minute and 48 seconds left on the clock when the Eagles went up 33. Oh, sorry, I'm doing right. Like we do my sums here, 27-26. I'm getting my sums right there. To go up, the Rams then drove down the field. Stafford took down the field, and they put them in a position to get the winning field goal. Josh Carty's field goal was then blocked, but not only was it blocked, Jordan Davis picked it up and ran it back for a touchdown to cap the game off, and basically make it look as if the Eagles won the game by 7 points when they basically didn't, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it's a fantastic way to end the game. I mean, I guess if the best way to win a game is with the go-ahead touchdown, the next best has to be a game clinching turnover, which goes for the week, and especially in special teams. And that was a big theme, which we'll go on to talk about a little bit later on, just in terms of the number of games that had big special teams plays, and in particular blocked field goals. But sticking with this one for a little moment, obviously this the Eagles come away with the win, 3-0. The Rams now dropped to 2-1. Does this start to put question marks over the Eagles and I guess the reign of dominance that we're maybe expecting from them this year?
Do you know what? See, if this had been any other team, I would say yes. But see, look at the Eagles last year in the regular season, where they just done enough each week. They just done enough, and they kept themselves. They went under the radar for a lot of last season, and especially in the NFC East, because the Commanders and the step forward that they made last year, the Eagles kind of just stayed under the radar. This year, obviously, being the defending champions, people looking at the Eagles thinking, right, what are you going to do? But they're probably just doing the same as they were doing last year. That got them all about the championship. So I think it's hard to tell at the moment kind of where that goes. So the first 3 games of the season, they beat the Cowboys in the opening game, they beat the Chiefs, and they beat the Rams. That's 3 big wins. It's not as if it's teams, there's other teams we'll talk about later, but the 3 wins maybe aren't as big as you would think. But we've got the Bucks next, another 3-0 team. So again, that's going to be a vital game for them. If they can win that, then it's just the Eagles being the Eagles. As a Cowboys fan, pains me to say it, but if they just keep doing what they're doing, then they're going to end up at least in the postseason again.
Absolutely. I guess switching sides for a moment now to the Rams, they had a big lead, 19 points up in the third quarter, and end up coming away with the loss, but still in a position to get the win at the end of the game. I guess, 9 times out of 10, you kick the field goal and you do come away with a big victory in the road. Where does this sit them? Can they kick on from the platform they built last year?
Yeah, I think so. The NFC West isn't the strongest this year. It's not been strong for a few years. Obviously, the 49ers have been that team who have been the Avengers and been running away with it, and we'll come to them later on in terms of where they're sitting at the moment. But NFC West is wide open for anybody to win. A loss away to the Eagles doesn't derail the Rams season. I mean, they've got the Colts next, and then the 49ers before they play the Ravens. So if they can pick up the 2 victories in the next 2 games, they're probably going to be top of the division after week 5. So I think the Rams should be fine in that division. I can't see the Seahawks, the 49ers, or the Cardinals challenging them to come the tail end of the season for that NFC West title. I think we'll see the Rams in the off-season. How they perform and what that looks like over the next few weeks is what's going to kind of determine how far they can go. If they can step up and they can put that type of performance they put in last night but come away with a victory again in these big games, then that shows that they can make it the step up in the big games, and it's not just going to be the divisional games that they win. So I think the Rams will be fine. How much of an impact they have post-season remains to be seen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I have said before that September has almost become the new pre-season in a way, and you're still kind of seeing a lot of different teams trying to find out who they are. The teams that win, they lose, how much do those results actually mean? It takes a bit of time to calibrate, but it certainly feels with the Rams that they are one of the sides that actually have a bit more of a feel for. And obviously, particularly in the offense, you've got Matty Stafford, got Devontae Adams, got Puka Nacua. There's multiple players there that give you a foundation that, and it's particularly in that division, they should have a good course ahead for them.
Yeah.
But I think moving on now, we'll switch to a homer game for me, I guess. Still wearing the Giants hoodie rather than a brown paper bag at this stage. We'll talk about I guess both sides in this one. Is the Chiefs, who went to MetLife entering 0-2, along with the Giants, really needing the win. They came away with a 22-9 victory in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I was impressed with the Chiefs in this. I mean, I don't know what's happened to the Chiefs, but they're not the Chiefs that we're all used to. They now became that team that is just doing enough. When they went off to they've lost the first 2 games, but against, and again, a team that the Giants absolutely tore apart, I can't really say much, but against the Chiefs shouldn't expect to go to play the Giants and win, maybe not comfortably, but not be in a position to win. I mean, the Giants should have been leading at half-time in this game. It was 6-all. Mahomes fumble. It was a backwards pass. It became a fumble. It was picked up by the Giants. Somehow, Pat Mahomes dragged the ball out of Bob Ekereki's arms and recovered the ball, which was, I think, around about the 20-yard line of the Chiefs. So if the Giants had held on to that ball, probably scoring a touchdown or at least a field goal, probably leading, maybe not leading, but it could have had a good chance of leading it at the second half. But then the Chiefs gave the Giants the balls back, and the Giants again should have scored to go up to a half-time. But the Chiefs, they were leading 9-6 at half-time, but it was all field goals, and nothing was happening to impress me. And apart from maybe one a takeaway and Thornton impressed me for the Chiefs wide receiver, but there was nothing really that jumped out at me from the Chiefs that made me think you're going all the way to the Super Bowl this year. I just can't see it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it does seem like that turnover prevented by Mahomes really did prove to be a turning point. So at that point, actually, the game was still tied at 6, and the Chiefs just, I think, outside their own red zone. The backwards pass by Mahomes, obviously they recover and manage to take the ball away. And after a trade of possessions, the Chiefs get a a field goal just before the half and put them up. That you flip that around and then you think, actually, the Giants, they could, at least put some points on the board, put a bit of pressure, and it's a different situation. Because I guess through week 1 and week 2, it kind of been a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde affair for the Giants. Week 1 didn't score a single touchdown, and then week 2, Russell Wilson puts up the fireworks for 4 of the 5 quarters, shall we say?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, from a Giants perspective, looking at this one on paper, you thought that the Chiefs were always going to be a stretch, even with the 0-2 start. But I think to see the manner of that defeat, so again, that's now 2 out of the first 3 games where they've not scored a touchdown throughout the entire game. I think the consensus seems to be on the Chiefs that actually, even though they lost the first 2 games, this was probably their worst performance of the season so far. So for Brian Daboll and the Giants to not really lay a glove on them at home, that's got to be a concern. And obviously, one of the big stories now coming out of New York is that the calls for how long does Russell Wilson have?
Yeah, so just before we started recording, so just for people that are watching or listening to this, we record this on a Monday night. So just before we came on, Brian Daboll done his press conference and he was asked, what's happening at quarterback? Rather than turn around and automatically going, Russell Wilson starts next week, his answer was, we are evaluating all options. To me, that means Jackson Dart's going to start next week. Because if you're in this position deciding that Russell Wilson's your start, or there's at least doubt that Russell Wilson's going to start, and I think we spoke about it before we come on here, Gavin, not to jump on your sort of being a Giants fan, but watching that game and those highlights, Russell Wilson's decision making was all over the place for the big play. So I mean, it threw some great throws, and it was against the Cowboys last week. We've seen the numbers that he put. They were great throws, and they made some really deep throws. But you made it yourself. The decision to make that pass in overtime against the Cowboys last week was a terrible decision. The first interception last night, he threw basically towards triple coverage, and it was picked off. He threw to Wandale Roberts, and it was picked off. The second interception, I think, is absolutely criminal because you're 2nd and 6 on the Chiefs 30, going into the half time. You get a chance to at least put 3 points up because you're on 30, and he underthrows Malik Neighbours in the corner of the end zone. But Malik Neighbours is never open. He's putting up a jump ball on 2nd and 6 where he doesn't need to. Again, that's then picked off, and then at the end of the game, the Chiefs have pretty much got the game won by this point. But your 1st and goal on the Chiefs 5. It goes back 5 yards. It ends up it's 4th and goal on the 10. And Russell Wilson throws the ball at the back of the end zone. With nobody near it. There's no wide receiver. It's one of those where there's a second down, you just throw it away to save time, to nothing on. It's 4th down. Why are you just throwing the ball away? Throw it towards a receiver. Try and create
pass.
I mean, just make a pass. It doesn't matter who's in the end zone. Throw it towards him because you can get a PI, you can get a holding, you can get anything. But just to throw the ball away on 4th down. I know the game, at this point the game's done, right? The score's not going to win you the game. Well, maybe, let's see how long was left the clock. Win at 49. You could have scored and tried an onside kick. So the game wasn't necessarily done. But just throw it away, and I just don't get it. I think decision making was poor on those 3 plays especially. So I think Jackson Dart starts next week. I think they've got to make the call before. And it sounds really daft because we're only coming into week 4 next week. They need to make the call next week and what they want to do with this season, because you know what? See if you're writing the season off, bring Jackson Dart in and just give him the rest of the season to see what he can do. Are the Giants realistically going to recover from a 3-0 start to win the NFC East, considering the Commanders and Eagles are there? Probably not. I think the Cowboys are going to do it for a 1-2 start because of the performances. Put Jackson Dart in. What have you got to lose? I mean, from a Giants perspective, Gav, what do you think they should do?
Well, see, there's a really interesting one in terms of the context for this game. So I'll probably start off with just forgetting who they've got next week. I'll come on to that in a sec. Let's think about the fact that I believe that the longer you can sit a rookie, the better. It would be my personal opinion. So if you think that the team's in a bad situation, and to be fair, some of these issues do seem to be on Russ himself rather than some of the other issues. You see, you've talked about the decision making there. The next game that the Giants have, they play host to the 3-0 Chargers. So to me, it maybe does come back to your point actually about what are your expectations, because morale is pretty low in New York. Being realistic about this, is it better that the Giants lose that one with Dart under centre or Russ under centre? Because the following week, the Giants then in week 5 going to face the Saints in New Orleans, and that's one where actually even really pessimistic Giants fan will think we've got a good shot of getting a win there. But again, does that then put an expectation on Jackson Dart in his first start to think you must go and win? So there's a bit of psychology to think about there.
But what I would say, just on that point you make about the next 2 games, right? The Chargers to me is a free hit, right? There's nobody expecting the Giants to beat the Chargers next week. So put that in. You don't know what you're going to get. Put him in, see what happens. If he loses, you can go, it's the Chargers. Do you know what I mean? If you then wait and put him against the Saints, and for some reason the Saints then win that game, it'll be like, oh, that's because we started Jackson Dart. Do you know what I mean? So that then becomes like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have changed. Whereas if you put him against the Chargers next week and he loses but performs okay or shows what he can do, then it's a win-win situation for him and for the team. Because then he goes into the Saints game and it's like, well, we've seen what he could do last week. Maybe he's not ready yet. If you throw him into that Saints game as his first start and you lose, then it becomes I think that becomes a massive issue. So I think you put him in, you got a free hit against the Chargers, put him in, see what he can do. You never know. Even if he throws a couple of touchdowns and leads an offense to some sort of reasonable performance, that's a positive. You know what I mean? Yep. So that's where I see it. You know what I mean? Is like, just give the guy a chance and a free hit rather than put the pressure on him. You're expected to go and beat the Saints. That puts too much pressure on him.
Yeah, and I think we've seen certainly in Dallas last week, and there's probably are some points to be made around the quality of your defensive backs, but there are players in there that can cut up points, both through the air. We've seen with Neighbours and Wan'Dale Robinson even chipping in, and then obviously Cam Scatterbo seems to be one of the positive points. I think in previous years, the concern with the quarterback position has always been that actually any quarterback would struggle with the lack of weapons, with the offensive line. And although it was a wee bit scary in week 1, it doesn't seem to be that Russ has been just continuously running for his life. A lot of it is actually on him. So, as I say, my position would probably be normally that you want to sit Jackson Dart, but I think the big fact in this as well is that Daboll is now really playing for his job this season. It's his quarterback. He's had a number of years, and you can talk about the Giants as a franchise if they want to just kind of write this year off, but the coach is actually someone who really can't do that, and even the general manager. So I think that's something we're going to have to look out for. But moving on, we'll go from a team that has a quarterback dilemma to a pair of teams that really had the choice taken out of their hands, as we had the QB2 Bowl. As the Cincinnati Bengals travelled to the Minnesota Vikings with both teams looking okay in the field, but obviously having big losses at the game's most important position. And this one, Dan, really turned out to be a dominant win for the home team Vikings.
Yeah, I mean, I said to you off air, and I made this point about the Vikings offense, which I really like at the Vikings offense. And I've been saying that when they drafted JJ McCarthy, also he got injured, the Vikings offensive system was set up for JJ McCarthy. That's why I drafted him, because it was set up that he's a type of quarterback that fits into that system. That system's also why Sam Darnold was so successful last year, because he's the type of quarterback who can play in that system. Going into this week and watching the highlights, Carson Wentz is the same mould. Sam Darnold, JJ McCarthy, Carson Wentz, they're all very similar types of quarterbacks. The system's set up. That's why Carson Wentz is the QB2, because we've obviously thought we need a quarterback that fits in our system. We don't just want somebody different. And that's what they've done with Carson Wentz. And the system allowed them to go out there and dominate the game. I mean, the Vikings, like you said, is a very dominant win. The Bengals, it's hard to work out what are they up against with the Bengals now. Do you know what I mean? It is like, where are the Bengals going to go? Carson Wentz went out there, and we know Carson Wentz is a good quarterback. I mean, he's not as if he's not, no offence, but he's not a Jake Brown in QB2. Carson Wentz has been a QB1 in this league, and he has played, as the stat has said, 6 different teams in 6 different seasons now he started the game for. Do you know what I mean? So he is a good quarterback. He only threw 20 passes. He didn't have to throw a lot. But he did throw, we got 173 yards and 2 touchdowns. But again, I think the system was perfect for him to come into, and that Bengals defence is all over the shop as well, which obviously helped them as well. But that's to take nothing away from the Vikings. The Vikings absolutely dominated this game on the ground and through the air. And the Bengals, like I say, it's Joe Burrow being out of the game stopped the Bengals scoring, but the Bengals defence didn't stop the Vikings scoring. So that's what it comes down to. It's okay if you maybe don't put up the amount of points because you're not missing your QB1, but if your defence can't stop the scoring, it doesn't matter who you've got a quarterback, as Brian continuously jokes about Joe Burrow having to throw for 600 yards a game.
Yeah, obviously we just talked about Giants Chiefs, and as much as the Giants have an anemic offense, they still only lost by 13 points rather than the 38 that we're seeing in the Bengals Vikings game. And yeah, I think it just shows you that the conversation that NFC North, as much as we've talked about, has been one of the toughest divisions in football. I think everyone's very much gravitating around the Lions and the Packers has really been the two to watch there. But it's very early days right now, but that's a big win from the Vikings at home, admittedly, and against another team playing with the backup. It was a strong win, and I don't think you can write them off.
Yeah, what helped the Vikings though was their defense. The Vikings, and again, we're not talking about it up against an elite quarterback against Jake Browning, but Isaiah Rodgers had a pick six. He also picked up a fumble and ran that back for a touchdown, and he also had a forced fumble as well. So he absolutely balled out for the defense on the Vikings, and that shows you that you need both sides of the ball. When you've got your QB2, your defense needs to do their job to allow that QB the opportunity. Defenses on the field all the time, they're going to bust, they're going to be knackered. So they need to step up and get teams off the field. The one thing I will say is that expect a massive fine coming out for Jeff Okudah because he was lucky not to be ejected for a terrible helmet to helmet. The target was a really bad one. I don't know why they'll all say we should have been ejected, but it's a really bad helmet to helmet with Jeff Okudah, who stayed on, and he then got an interception later in the game as well. So Vikings overall performance was excellent, both sides of the ball. Jordan Mason ran for 116 yards. Obviously, we're talking about Aaron Jones getting injured last week and missing out. Could Jordan Mason step up? Yes, he could. 116 yards, 2 touchdowns. The Vikings looked good, but it's hard to say did they look good or did the Vikings look bad, or was it a kind of mixture of in between, which I'm probably gravitating towards. Maybe slightly more towards the Vikings being good, but there's a lot of stuff that the Bengals didn't do very well in that game at all, especially on the offensive side of the ball.
Absolutely. I guess we'll maybe have a look at a recurring theme through some other games, which is, I guess, as the season moves on, we're finding out who these teams are, but also the teams that are really having to deal with injury issues at the moment. So we had the 49ers also there without Brock Purdy at the moment. They managed to pull off a late victory in their game with Mac Jones at the heart of that.
Yeah, so again, another team that's getting absolutely decimated by injuries as the 49ers. Again, before we came on air, Nick Bosa's out in ACL. That's him, he's done for the season as well. So that's another one that they can rank up as an injury, missing for them for the rest of the season. Watching the 49ers, the Cardinals, what the 49ers done very well was they simplified, I don't know if his playbook was simplified, but they had a simple game plan for Mac Jones. They didn't overly complicated it. Basically, whatever the Cardinals gave them, they took. The longest catch that the 49ers had was 34 yards in the whole game. But even that, outside of that was an outlier because every other pass they had went for no more than 20 yards. They just basically took what the Cardinals gave them and kind of worked their way up the field and got the points on the board. So Mac Jones, 184 yards, a touchdown. There was an interception in there as well. But they've done enough. 49ers, I was disappointed with the Cardinals. They're in a position where you're up against a backup quarterback, not all the weapons there for him. At this point, the Cardinals, 49ers, they've done enough. Mac Jones kept it simple, done what he had to do to get his team in the positions to score points. And at the end of the day, again, it's another one that came down to the last kick of the game to win it. Eddie Pinheiro kicking the field goal to win it 16-15 at the end. So, yeah, it wasn't a pretty game to watch, to be fair. The first score went on the board halfway through the second quarter before the Cardinals scored a field goal. The first quarter was not much to write home about.
Yeah, it's not the highest tempo games. But one thing that I'm maybe spotting with this as well is, we always talk about how the quarterback is the most important position in the game. But what I noticed with the teams that have managed to deal with that situation, the change at the quarterback position, is, the 49ers, yes, they had a tough year last year, but they're, I guess, a well-respected, well-run franchise, well-coached franchise. Similar with the Vikings as well. Okay, they're maybe not constantly making deep runs into the playoffs and going to Super Bowls, but these are teams that are stable. They manage things well, and they put the other pieces in place so that, like you said, you've got the system, you've got that foundation so that you can bring someone else in and succeed. So, yeah, there's obviously some other factors in play there, whereas the Bengals, again, We know that it's a franchise that they've got some phenomenal players, but they just don't seem to know how to put it all together.
I mean, the Bengals, they need to make a decision now. The Bengals, if they want, we don't know how long Joe Burrow's going to be out for, but if they want to do anything, they need to make a move at quarterback right now. Brown is not going to get them through this phase while Joe Burrow's out. The next run of games are the Broncos, the Lions, and the Packers. They're not winning any of those games with Jake Brown at quarterback, so they need to have a look at who's about. Maybe someone that's in your own backyard at the moment, someone like Winston that'll come in and just steady the ship and has a bit of experience, and someone like him that he's not going to do anything flashy. But they need to make a decision that Jake Brown is not going to get them through these next 3 games. I'm interested to see if that front office decide to make any moves, or whether they just stick with Jake Brown. And I think they are 2-1, but they're not winning any of those next 3 games.
Absolutely, and I think obviously we know it's not a long-term thing, because Burrow, it's a tough injury, but he will come back from turf toe. But I think the Cincy fans will know that they've been blessed by having 2 fantastic receivers, and obviously Jamar Chase, but also T. Higgins. That can't last forever. You've got to take advantage of those toys before eventually, market forces dictate that that's going to get split up. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think that's when we're going to have to make a move. And I guess kind of round out that hat trick of backup QBs getting the win, we should talk about the Commanders and Marcus Mariota as well.
Yeah, I mean, so the Commanders, they beat the Raiders 41-24 because Mariota put up 207 yards and a touchdown. I like Mariota as a quarterback. Anybody that's watched the quarterback series on Netflix showed that he's a decent person as well. Didn't really do well to maybe not treated as well as the Falcons as he was hoping for. Mariota's a good quarterback. I mean, he's probably one of as QB2s you can get in the league. He's probably one of the best. He's probably up there kind of him and Wentz. Probably one of the best options you can get at QB2 in the league. That if your quarterback went down, you know you're going to have a steady hand there. So they get the 1 touchdown to McCaffrey, but they done all right. I mean, 200 yards it was enough. I mean, the Raiders put up 289 yards, but it's 41 points is a lot. And obviously, he's as much as he's only thrown for 1 touchdown, he's led that offense to those points. Yeah, I mean, I think Mariota as a QB2 is fine. Commanders, if they had to have him next week again, I don't think they would be concerned if that was a couple of weeks he was there. Commanders have got the Falcons next week. Well, yeah, that's a story itself, isn't it? Yeah, to be fair, actually. Mariota leading the Commanders at Falcons next week. Let's bookmarking that one for next week's podcast.
The revenge game. But, I mean, it is interesting, actually, because that particular draft class have actually just talked about the top 2 quarterbacks. So, there's not really been, the great accolades, and there's maybe not going to be any Hall of Famers coming from that one. But it says a lot that, Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, they've both been in the league for now over 10 years. So as much as, okay, they're not having these MVP caliber seasons to talk about, there's still a lot of value in having these guys around. You don't get to that stage in the league without having something to offer. And I think that is a key part for, any team like the Commanders. You've got the young quarterback in Daniels, but, we've seen this before in recent times with Robert Griffin. It's like, you've got this guy comes in, sets things alight, and then gets injured, and it's what do you do next? So to have that bit of continuity, I think, is really important for the Commanders, and just help keep them afloat for the time being. But we'll move maybe away from talking about the quarterback battles to special teams, because we've talked about the other phase of the game already, and it just seemed like there was a spate of big plays in special teams this weekend. Of course, with the Eagles game clinched with the blocked field goal, but we had a real upset in Cleveland this weekend as the Browns managed to come from behind to win with a game-ending field goal against the Packers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so gutted for Brian that he's not on tonight, because I would have been absolutely loving talking about this tonight. I mean, yeah, it is. I watched it. It was a weird game to watch. Like on Red Zone, you're just like, surely the Packers aren't going to blow this. You know what I mean? It was just one of those. It's the Browns pack. Come on. I mean, I'll put my up. See, I took the Packers as my survivor. Thankfully, they get 2 lives. But the Packers have lost my life last night. But I do shout out to Brian. Something that Brian said a few weeks ago that I can't let him lie, is that he said that Quinjon Judkins would not let a cleat touch the field this year. That he would not see any game time for the Browns. He went for 94 yards a touchdown last night, Brian, so I think he might have got that one slightly wrong. I think he maybe owe me an apology for that. But yeah, the Browns, I said this in our previous show, the Browns have the weapons on the offense. I mean, they've got Judkins, they've got Njoku, they've got Tillman, Ford. They've got the weapons there to do it, but they just haven't. I mean, like, they seem to kind of step up, but the Browns defense stepped up massively. We've seen that Browns defense we're used to seeing last night. Something that Brian's went on about in the off-season was Carson Schweiger. He had a great game last night for them to kind of hold the Packers down, do you know what I mean? But I'm not sure what to make of the Packers' performance last night. I don't know. It was a strange one.
Yeah, I mean, I think they really were one of the pre-season darlings for everyone, and then obviously go and beat up in the Lions in week 1 at Lambeau. You're thinking that they're on their way to perhaps a Super Bowl season. But I guess the one thing, and again, Brian's probably going to be glowing, the Browns are a team that don't get a lot of respect. Don't get me wrong, some of that is for good reason, but they have a fantastic defense.
Oh, they have.
This is a game that wasn't. This game wasn't really showing up in red zone for most of even because it was just so tight. I mean, I think it was 3-0 Packers at half. Even sort of deep into the third quarter, it was 10-0. The Browns do seem to be another team that have that question at the quarterback position coming up. They've drafted 2 quarterbacks this off season, and Flacco is obviously getting towards the end of his career, and I think it's again that guy that's been able to come and steady the ship, but he's clearly not the future, not getting that offense moving. There are pieces there, and that is a big win that I don't think we can get away from. And obviously talking about all 3 phases of the game, to set up that game-winning field goal, we had a block at the other end. So, there's a lot of pride there in Cleveland. And, with the Bengals falling away, the Steelers, we don't quite know what we've got there. The Ravens could, by the time this goes out, they could be 1-2. So there's all to play for in the North.
Yeah, I mean, I think with this game, like, you look at it, with 3 minutes and 18 seconds left in the game, the Packers were up by 7. It was 10-3 at this point. And so Jordan Love throws an interception, which then the Browns turn into a touchdown. That was a Judkins touchdown. And then, as you mentioned there, Packers got the field thinking they're going to get a field goal to go ahead, and it's blocked and recovered by the Browns, who then go up the field and get their own field goal to win the game as time expired. So, yeah, the AFC North, again, as I've said, is one of the hardest divisions in the league, but this year it's maybe not for the fact that we're going to have several successful teams. I think this year might be more a case of, it's a lot tighter because teams aren't winning. The Ravens should win away with the division come the end of the season, but it's not as running out as all shining nicely as the AFC North might have been at the start of the season, in terms of, especially with the expectation on Aaron Rodgers, the Steelers, obviously the Bengals with Joe Burrow, and then the Ravens. So it'll be interesting to see how the Ravens go against the Lions tonight, to see where that leaves at the AFC North at the end of week 3.
Absolutely, we'll keep an eye on it. I mean, these are probably the biggest games of the week. We try to focus on the big stories, but I guess one theme that I think we need to just kind of follow up on is special teams, because we've talked about a couple of big plays already in some of the games, but those weren't the only ones, Dan. I think you had a few stats on the Seahawks in particular.
I'll come to the second stat. I'll come to in a minute. It blew my mind. But so the first one was that the Seahawks had a 95-yard punt return. Tony Hawken, 95-yard punt return, which was the Seahawks' first punt return for a touchdown in over 10 years. That was a ridiculous stat. But then they blocked a punt later in the game, which was a first block punt in 222 games, which was the longest streak in the NFL at that point, which stretched back to 2011, since the last time the Seahawks blocked a punt. So, special teams for Seahawks coming up massive and basically getting them 2 things that have not happened for over a decade. in the one game, which is just crazy.
Well, I'll see your stat there, and I'll throw out another one, which is that the Colts punt this week also set history because it's the longest streak that a team's gone without punting in the season. They've gone 19 straight possessions without needing to punt, and on the 20th that they punted. So, it's good money going in the Colts at the moment for the punter. I think actually they put out some highlights of the punter, and of course it was just him doing all the holding action. So yeah, no, it's good to be. But I think obviously it's a big plays there, but we should also probably shout out, the Jets. They fell to the Bucks, but again, almost pulled it off with another blocked field goal in that one.
I joked about it at the start of the show that it happened in the last minute of the games. Like, this one was ridiculous. I mean, the Bucks are kicking the field goal, thinking that's fine. We're going to take a lead at the end of the game. The Jets block it and then pick it up and run it back for a touchdown as well. So you're just like, the Bucks think we'll put ourselves in a position here to go up and be further in the lead, and suddenly the ball's in the end zone and the Jets are suddenly leading 27-26. The Bucks are like, what is going on here? And then this is like with a minute and 49 seconds left on the clock as well. So the Jets are thinking, won this game. Another massive special teams player was Will McDonald, walked it himself, picked it up and ran it all the way back to put them up 27-26 with a minute and a bit to go. But again, Baker Mayfield, we can never write Baker off. The Bucks up the field. James McLaughlin kicks a field goal where 10 expired to win the game for the Bucks. So again, special teams coming up big for the victory for the Bucks in the end, after them maybe blowing the game from just before it.
And I mean, obviously, some teams, special teams going brilliantly. One team that's really struggling at the moment is the Falcons. Obviously, they let go of Young Ho Koo.
Yeah.
After bad performance in week one, and they brought in John Parker Romo, who actually did go 5 for 5 in week 2, but he then had 2 bad misses against the Panthers last night. I guess we should say that when you lose 30-0, you've got problems beyond just your kicker, but obviously that's going to leave a bad taste in the mouth, and that's another team that's going to have a look at it and what they need to do in the third phase of the game. But it's been really interesting this week because we know that special teams matters, but I don't think it's ever been so obvious.
You've seen, we see field goals, walk-off field goal win games all the time. That is not new. But the amount of blocks and the amount of punt blocks, the amount of having 2 blocked field goals returned for touchdowns in the 1 week is probably very rare. But for both of them to happen that kind of within the last 2 minutes of the game, it probably never happened before. It probably will never happen again either. But to be fair, the Bucks recovered from it and went up parting. Obviously, as a kicker, you're probably thinking, come on, not again, James McLaughlin managed that one through to win the game. But yeah, everything just happened to be everything seemed to just be happening on special teams this week. It was just every time you look, something in special teams was happening. It was the Seahawks, or whether it was the Bucks, or whether it was the Jets or the Eagles. It was just crazy. I think the fact that it happened all at the end of the games just was exciting to watch.
Yeah, I'm really expecting Scott Hansen to come out with a new feature next week after this one, because I know we've got the witching hour, and we definitely saw wins become losses, losses become wins. But yeah, maybe we need to give a bit more love to the special teamers. We'll see how that goes. Going through that, obviously we talked about the main stories from week 3, and we're starting to get a bit of feel for where some of the teams are starting to stand in the league. We've got 6 teams that are 3-0, so everyone's really big in their way too early predictions. So I don't think it's way too early to do a power ranking. So let's maybe actually have a look at these 6 undefeated teams and just see where we think they stand. So just to recap, Monday Night Football, both teams are currently sitting 1-1, so we're not going to add to the collection. So we've got the Bills, the Bucks, the Colts, the Eagles, the Chargers, and the 49ers, Dan. So where's the cream of the crop sitting for you there?
So far, I would probably say the Bills. I think that the Bills are 3-0 are probably the strongest of the 3-0 teams in terms of performances so far. So I'm going to put the Bills probably top of my list so far this season. Yeah, Bills at number 1 for me.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to argue with that, because sometimes you can talk about the strength of the opposition, but they did beat the Jets comfortably. They beat the Dolphins fairly comfortably as well. And then they do have that marquee win in week 1. Okay, it was close, but I think everyone would say that that is a big deal to come back and beat the Ravens in a shootout. So, yeah, absolutely. I think we've both got Bills at number 1.
Yeah. Number 2 for me, I think I am going to have Los Angeles Chargers. I think the Chargers, putting ahead of the Eagles, are just, like I said to you earlier on, the Eagles are just doing enough. The Chargers have got that win against the Chiefs. Yeah, they beat the Raiders, but then again, they beat the Broncos this week as well. So, yeah, I'm putting the Chargers at number 2. I really like the Chargers this year. They're in a division where there's potentially 3 winners there. They're the only ones that are 3-0. So, yeah, I think they need to, for me, they go to 2. It's close, but I'm putting them at 2.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, I'm still probably seeing the Eagles take the top spot in this one, and I think the reason for that is because they've had two good wins. Maybe not in terms of result, but they've gone to Arrowhead. No matter what's going on in Kansas City, that's still a big win to go after the Super Bowl and get the victory there. And similarly, I think with the Rams, that's a game where it is a good team. Admittedly, you're playing at home, but they still came back. They got the victory. And I think you give credit to the Bills. I think you still need to give credit to the Eagles for seeing that game through and playing the full 60 minutes. I think that the Chargers definitely up there. I'm probably putting them as my number 3 in that group, partly because also I think momentum-wise, mentioned before they're going to New York, and that probably looking like they'll go to 4-0. They're in a good position. But yeah, it's close. But I think until we see another big result, I'm probably going to give the Eagles the advantage over the Chargers.
Yeah, no, I think it's completely fair. Like it could go either way. The Eagles, I don't know. Maybe it's just because the Eagles. Maybe I'm just being biased. Maybe that's what it is. Yeah, so I'll have the Eagles at 3, as we say there. So moving on to 4. For me, 4 is the Bucks. The Bucks just do it. The Bucks keep doing Baker Mayfield does Baker things. I mean, yeah, Bucks at 4. I really think it's even close to compare them to the Colts or the 49ers. The Bucks are definitely 4, and very easily 4. I don't think there's even any debate.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were similar, but I'm maybe going to switch it a bit because I do think that the Bucks, you've had a couple of wins against teams that are maybe not the best. They pulled it out late against the Texans, who are now 0-3. They pulled it out late against the Jets, who are also 0-3, I believe. That's right, isn't it?
The Jets are 0-3, yeah.
0-3. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a bit of I think there's a pedigree there, but the teams that they're getting the results in, I'm not so sure of. I think with the Colts, definitely a question mark there, but at the same time, to have had that consistency in offense, I think we would all agree that with Daniel Jones, it's a great start, but we're going to need to see more from him to know exactly what's going on there. But you've also got Jonathan Taylor that's firing as well. That they do have different ways to score. And there's obviously they've got options at receiver in terms of Pittman, in terms of Alec Pierce. So they've got people that can go and make plays. So I think for me, there's as much as questions, there's a bit of excitement with the Colts that I've been inclined to put them ahead of the Bucks, but we both agree, I think probably out of that pack of undefeated teams, the 49ers, they've won 3 games and that's to be applauded. They've managed injuries, but they're big injuries. We've seen obviously, Brock Purdy, you've lost your quarterback, which maybe you can manage against the Cardinals. When you go on to play these bigger games, how does that place you? And of course, it's now come out that Nick Bosa's out with an injury as well. So that's obviously going to be a big hit. It seems like it's last year all over again. The 49ers just seem to be losing various different players. And I'm sure they'll be competitive, but it's going to be a tough stretch ahead for them, which maybe then leads to just one final point in this, which is...
We want to do 5 and 6, because I'm not putting the Colts and the 49ers in my 5 and 6. That's why I put the Bucks at 4. That's why I put the Bucks at 4. Because as much as the Colts and the 49ers are 3-0, right, they're not the top 6 teams in the league at the moment, I don't think. I think the Packers go in there. I think the Packers I know we talked about them, the Browns beat them. Packers are a much better team than the Colts and the 49ers. As much as losing to the Browns should be an embarrassing thing. Sorry, Brian. I still think the Packers are a better team than the Colts. And if you put the Packers against the Colts right now in terms of playing their best game, the Packers win it easily. Same with the 49ers. So I think the Packers go in for me into that top 6. And then I think that the winner of whoever the Ravens and the Lions tonight goes into that top 6 as well for me as well. terms of who is really the best teams that are playing in the league at the moment. I know they're both going to be lost a game, so you're going to have. I'm basically putting two teams that are 2-1 in ahead of two teams that are 3-0. But I think that the teams that are going in are much better than the teams that are undefeated. 49ers are beat Cardinals, they beat the Seahawks, they beat the Saints. Yeah, I don't think you can measure up to say those 3 wins put you into the top 6, unfortunately, for the 49ers. So yeah, so I'm putting the Packers and the Ravens stroke Lions in ahead of the Colts and the 49ers.
I think the Monday Night Football is definitely going to be one to watch because it's very early in the season and it's not a must win. But at the same time, whoever wins that game, that is going to be a big deal for them. Probably bigger for the Lions if they do it because they'll be on the road. But whoever wins that, you're 2-1. The other team, the team that loses that game, they're by no means out of it. But all of a sudden, you played 3 weeks of the season and you've lost 2 games to fellow contenders. So it does start to raise questions, not to say that you're a bad team, but can you win the big games? So that's going to be a really interesting one to watch. And I think, I would absolutely agree that the winner from that game probably would be one of the top 6 as things stand. But as with power rankings, I'm absolutely sure that it'll evolve week to week as the season goes on. So let's see how that goes. But moving on from week 3, we'll maybe just start to take a look towards week 4. And a couple of interesting games in the calendar. Dan, what's standing out for you?
I mean, again, there's so many games. You've got the Eagles and the Bucks is a big, massive game. So as we just spoke about, both 3-0, where they go, that's a massive game for both of them. Titans and the Texans, both 0-3. That's a massive game for the Texans because we've not talked about them much tonight, but the Texans coming into this season, there's a lot of expectation on them. A lot of expectation on CJ Stroud, and to start that season on 3 is for the Texans fans has probably been unfathomable. Titans, we're starting to see bits of them looking okay. We've seen Cam Ward showing what he can do a wee bit. That could be a massive game. And then for me, Cowboys and the Packers is huge. If we want to do anything this season, we need to get back into a 500 record. And to do that against the Packers team that are, like I've just said, I'm impressed by, would be a great win for us. Packers are going to be smart for that loss last night, so they're going to come to Arlington thinking we can do the same to the Cowboys as we did in the playoffs a couple of years ago. I think if I'm picking 3 games, that's probably the 3 games I'm looking at this week that maybe have something riding on them in terms of what's going to happen going forward. I like you take the battle of the AFC. I'll give you that one to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's already really jumping out there, that game between the Ravens and the Chiefs, because as we've said a few times already, Monday Night Football still to happen as we record. That there's a big difference with this game in terms of who wins and loses. Potentially, you could have the Chiefs dropping to 1-3 and being a couple of games back from 500 again, and then obviously really are chasing the rest of the division. With the Chargers doing so well as things stand, so I think that's going to be a real battle that's definitely looking like must win for the Chiefs, and it's going to be pretty important for the Ravens, as I said, in terms of how you stand up to the contenders in that AFC conference. I think the other one that I'm kind of looking at, which is really interesting, was Colts travelling to the Rams, 2 teams that we've spent a bit of time talking about this evening. So yeah, I mean, the Colts rolling at 3-0 at the moment, but the Rams do look like a real test, and they're going to have to go to LA. They've got to travel to deal with that one as well. Let's see if the Indiana Jones and the quest for the winning season, as the fans had signs in the crowd at the weekend were saying, if that continues to be a success. Yeah, I think it's funny. I kind of wrote off week 3 a little bit last week in terms of not having the marquee games, but yeah, there's a few big ones there, and I'm sure we're going to get some surprises as well. I think Panthers, all of a sudden you get a team that's gone and won 30-0 to try and get a spark in their season against the Patriots. Again, a team that people have been watching and I think had greater expectations for the year. So 2 teams that have both started 0-2. They've got themselves the first win. But again, one of these teams are going to get back to 500. Another team's going to be 1-3. So again, it's how you kind of build those foundations for the rest of the season. That's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, there's a lot of divisions that are very finely balanced at the moment. And I know that sounds really daft to say, into week 3, but there's probably teams you were expecting that maybe have been a further ahead than they are at the moment. So the shocks in the scores that came across has left some divisions probably a bit more open than people were expecting as well. So.
Absolutely. But I think that brings us to the end of our week 3 roundup. So thanks everyone for listening. Don't forget to give us a follow on Spotify, Instagram, wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you get your socials. Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you again next time.